Alan Crawford with Conversica, and we are going to talk about the big misdirection and the wrong conclusion. So hopefully at the end of this you'll gather some of this information and be able to take this back with you. So just real quick in the room so I know who I'm yelling at. Internet directors or managers? Dealers? Okay. Internet salespeople of some sort? Couple? Okay, good. So it seems like this room's got a lot of people in digital. So I guess that makes sense for where we are. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. So the year that company was founded, I started in the car business. So if you don't know what year that was 1977. So Apple's been around a long time. I started in the car business in 1977. And went to work did retail, worked for this group for 17 years. So I'm an old car guy. I shoveled snow off of cars. So I can actually say I'm a car guy. And that's probably, if you're up north, that's one of the qualifications you have to have. Worked at Reynolds & Reynolds for 10 years. So did that end of it for many years. So got a chance to see the DMS and got a chance to see the evolution of the internet and the evolution of CRM tools. For those of you who were around Reynolds 20 years ago, I remember before Sales Vision, and I'm going way back to where CRM first started to where it is today. Stint at eBay Motors, and got a chance to see some really new technology. And just when I thought I saw it all, I'm here at Conversica, or artificial intelligence. So there is something true to that adage about teaching an old dog new tricks. I keep learning new things as I've been in the business now I stopped at 30 plus years, so a long time. And I got a chance to see a lot of the evolution. And I see a lot of faces in this room who may not be able to say 30 years in the business, but can say that they've been in the business for quite a few years. And then a lot of new faces out there. So you would not have had the opportunity to actually live in a world where a fax took 12 minutes. I know that that's going to blow your mind that even that existed. So what we're going to talk about is what's really happened over the last 25 years and how we've been looking in the wrong place and how big data, which is what artificial intelligence really is data, what that does and allows us to see. And it taught me, if you've come to some of these seminars over the last couple of years, the amount of data that we can pull from working 10, 20 million leads is a lot. That's interesting because it's made me rethink about the whole way that we do business. And many times it gives us that information I've lived the way, I've been in the car business for so long, I go, this is the way it works. And then the data says, yeah, no, not really. It doesn't work that way. It really works this way. So artificial intelligence, our ability to gather that data, send out 100 million emails, and get the responses and be able to analyze that data is giving us information you're going to see today. And when we're working 10 million leads, one of the good things that we get is we get to see all the lead providers. And we treat them all exactly the same. So all third-party lead providers, manufacturer sites, subscription sites, pay per lead, all of it we get a chance to work, and we treat them all the same. Then we pull all the analytics together and figure out what we're actually seeing in the marketplace. And so after all these years, we're going to start with, instead of drawing the wrong conclusion, or the wrong misconception, we're going to actually look at drawing the wrong conclusion and think about this. So I'm going to give you like an old, I'm going to give you an old picture. So when you see this, a lot of you will recognize Peter Minuit, who is actually bartering for Manhattan, which we know as Manhattan, almost 400 years ago. And a lot of us grew up thinking about this, seeing this, and we've heard the story about how he bought it for $24 worth of glass beads, which is not true. It was really goods and service. It was some muskets. It was some silver. It was about 60 guilders is what he ended up paying for Manhattan. And we've always heard that that was a bad deal. The Indians got a bad deal. So, but that's one way to look at it. So another way to look at this is if you looked at it this way. So if you look at Manhattan as a whole, they actually determined that Manhattan, a couple of years ago, is worth about, the developable land there is about $825 billion worth of real estate, a couple of years ago. if you ended up taking the $24 that he paid for it, equivalent to $24, like 60 guilders, and you put it in the bank at 8% interest rate after 389 years, you actually come out to $827 billion. So in the equivalent, what happened is, if you had put the money in the bank, you actually would have ended up making $27 billion better deal by taking the cash. So it's a question of how we look at things. And that's when you're drawing like the wrong conclusion when we look at data. And one of the things that we're constantly looking at is saying, okay, we thought it was this way, but if we look at it a different way, it could be something completely different. Now, the next part is the big, it's really the idea that we have spent the last 30 years looking in one direction instead of looking in the other. How many people in this room track close rates? It should be everybody, right? I mean, who doesn't track a close rate? I mean, I've lived on close rates. How much did we close? What was the close rate? What did we close this weekend? How was last month? We lived in a world of close rates. So what big data, and quite frankly, almost all the companies that come to you, third-party providers, anybody that's selling anything to a dealer, talks about how many vehicles you could sell, how many more cars you could close, how much. Well, one of the things that big data has taught us is that close rates are not a good indicator of future success. It's really when you leave out of the car business, and Conversica, we're in about 7 other verticals. We're in real estate and insurance and healthcare. And one of the things that I learned is outside of our industry, close rates are almost never talked about. It's not, they don't measure it at all because it ends up being something that is not a good measure of future success. Yet in our industry, it's what we have learned to live and breathe over 30 years. We track close rates because the last manager tracked close rates and because the manager before him. And if you go back long enough, well, we only had so much data to begin with, so close rates were at least something we could track. But today we can start to track something different. So close rates are a bad indicator of effectiveness in a lead provider. And so we're going to talk to you about a better way or a different way to look at lead providers. So when we looked at all the data and we pull 10 million leads and then we work them all the same way and we pull that data, we should have found some consistencies if close rates really made a difference. But it didn't. We saw different close rates with the same lead provider from dealerships directly across the street from one another. So how is that possible? If one lead provider had a much better lead source, then how come we could not find the consistency in the close rates? It was all over the board. If one thing was consistent about close rates, it was that it's inconsistent. The information wasn't there. And the more that we looked at the data, the more we realized that close rates are just not a good indicator of results. So right now, a lot of you are going, what are you talking about? How could this be possible that close rates are almost meaningless? If you leave anything when you leave this room, it is, I've been looking at the wrong place. We want to show you the right place to look, but close rates are not the right place to look at the future success of your dealerships. And as internet directors and managers, you will be ineffective if you chase close rates. So we're going to show you where the data tells us to look and how to be good stewards of your dealership and good stewards of marketing dollars. So I think all of you in this room, let me see, will actually be familiar with this commercial. I don't know if this is going to play or not, so I'm going to give him a second. Actually, we're not going to give him a second because he may not play. Doesn't matter. You may recognize this commercial. It's Rosalind Capital commercial. You almost can't watch TV without seeing Big Bill Devane, who's a second, I don't know, I guess Bill was hot so many years ago. He's an actor of some repute many, many years ago. But Bill does this commercial for Rosalind Capital, and they're all over the commercial TV. And his big thing is about gold bullion. And he's constantly talking about you should invest in your 401 in gold, and about the investments and the future investments with gold. But it doesn't matter this commercial or any other commercial like this. When you're looking at investments, and leads could be looked at as investments, what you're effectively looking at is this one statement that always comes at the end. At the end of investing in gold in your 401 is a statement that says, please note that past performance is not indicative of future performance. Closing rates are that right there. So your closing rates that you're tracking today are really looking backwards and not forward. What you at the end of the month, or at the end of the weekend, or at the end of the day, what you've closed is indicative of what happened in the past. It's not what's going to happen tomorrow. Now, why is that important? Let's take a look at this. So sales is a variant. It changes. Where sales as a metric is a lagging indicator. So again, we want to keep thinking that close rates really are about what happened yesterday and not what's going to happen tomorrow. And let me give you an example of stores in this area that are here today. If you took January's, the same people who walked in your dealerships in December, not the same number, the same people came in from December, came in this month in January, I would venture to bet you would not sell the same cars. It'd be different. If you sold 250 cars last month, 250 people came in and bought a car, if those same 250 came in the month of January instead of December, you would not sell 250. You might have sold 200, might have sold 300. But the same people will not end up being the same amount. The close rate won't be the same. It's because there's too many variables in close rates to watch that. So when we look at, it's a randomness of the close rate. So why? Let's go over the pieces of it. Why? So price is one of the things that affect close rates. So then we've got options. Do we have the right options on the car? Do we have the right finance rates? Do we have rebates? Do we have the vehicle of the person's choice? Is the trade-in value the same? Is the marketing this month the same? Is the likability? Does the salesperson and the customer get along? All of those things have to happen before a deal is made. So, and then you can count it as a close rate. And every day, every single customer has to go through all of those things to get to an actual sale, which can be converted to close rate. So those things are not predictable. They're unpredictable. So as managers, we're looking at close rates when that doesn't give us a way to predict the future and how to run our business next month or tomorrow even. This really has more to do with the idea that what's measurable. And when we look at all those things, we effectively get just a big wheel of chance. So what you effectively have is, as leads or opportunity come into your store, you've got to go through all of those different things to actually make a sale every single time. And it's basically a wheel of chance. But the opportunity has the value. So the value is not in the actual close rate, but in the opportunity to get to the close rate. See, one does not measure close rate, simply measure close rate. You may be aware of that one. I kind of like that. I'm a more door kind of guy. So, and close rates, again, are more of like the lottery. So looking at close rates, if you said, oh, we closed 23% of our deals last month, so this month we want to close 23%. It's literally like looking at the lottery and playing yesterday's numbers today, thinking, oh, well, we should hit it because those numbers came up. It's meaningless. It's a variable that's ineffective. So the question is, what are we measuring? So if I can convince you that close rates really are ineffective, then the thing is, okay, well, what is effective? What should we be measuring? So if close rates are not it, then you would say it have to be the number of leads. So if I'm buying X number of leads from a lead provider, then if it's not close rates, if a lead provider can give me 100 leads, then it must be that. No, it's not that. So it's not close rate for a lead provider, and it's not the number of leads. It is the number of engaged leads. So here's the new metric as an internet director or as an owner or as a manager. You need to figure out how to manage. And you need to figure out how to measure. What is an engaged lead? So close rates are looking backwards. Number of leads are irrelevant. It's engaged leads. Let me tell you what engaged leads mean, because you're going to have to try to figure out how to start to measure this. Because this one component is the difference between you staying at where you are today and growing your dealership, investing the right third-party providers, and holding them accountable the correct way. So close rates are not a good way to hold third-party providers accountable. Close rates are why you hold your managers and your salespeople accountable, but not third-party providers. Their job is to give you opportunity. So here's what engaged leads are. So there's different terms for this. Some of you may recognize engaged leads. Some of you may recognize it as the volley. It's a true volley. I'll give you our definition of what engaged lead is. So a lead, someone submits a lead, you ask a question or you answer it, the lead responds. It's not the first lead in, it's not your response back, it's the response back from the lead. The actual engagement. That's the percentage. We track engagement by that one tool. That, a lot of dealerships, I work with top 100 dealer groups all over the country. A lot of them track it as the volley. Even, they don't need to use our service, but they have their own way to track that. So what you effectively have, let's take a lead provider that gives you 100 leads in a month. If only 50 respond to you, you have a 50% engagement rate. In other words, you've got a lead, you try to answer the lead, you send out, you ask the questions, you call, you do whatever you can do, but you only get a hold of 50. You have a 50% effective rate on that lead provider. That's really what you're trying to figure out, is what is my engagement rate of my lead provider's total engagement rate, and how do I raise it? How do I get more engaged leads? That's really the one number. It's hard to look for. Perfect. It's supposed to be hard to look for. If it was easy, we'd already be tracking it. It's a difficult number to look for, because what you're trying to determine is your job as internet directors and managers and dealers is to give your dealerships the more chances and more opportunities. The only way to do that is in the internet department, is with engaged leads. So the leads only count if they respond back, if they actually engage with you. That's what you're actually trying to grow. I can assure you of this. If you sold 100 cars this month in the internet department, you had to have at least 100 opportunities, at least 100 engaged leads. Nobody's here selling 100 cars on 50 opportunities. Doesn't happen. I have to have more opportunities, more engaged leads than the number of cars I sell. It's a waterfall effect. Now, how many, just on that explanation, how many dealers in this room try to track engaged leads as the way I've explained it? There's like 2 or 3 hands. It's difficult. I mean, you have to think of the leads differently. So, because typically what we've been doing is this. We take 100 leads from a third-party provider and we count 100 leads. Then here's how we do it. We go, we sold 6 cars. And we go, okay, we divide the 6 cars by the 100 leads, and we go, and your third-party provider, not everybody, I get it, not everybody does it a little bit different. I've got my eye on you. So everybody does it a little bit different, but we're dividing the number of cars sold. We think of close rates against lead providers. Close rates are irrelevant. Push them aside. What you're trying to give your dealership is the most opportunities, which is the most people walking in that showroom that you can get. That will only come from engaged leads. You cannot make an appointment, which means you cannot get a person in the showroom if they do not engage with you. So getting a third-party provider, and if there are any present, giving me a lot of leads that only have 20% engagement doesn't do me any good, because I only count the 20% I could actually talk with or actually have two-way conversation with. That's the value you bring to me, is engaged leads. Give me the opportunity to make an appointment that ends up at showroom traffic, which puts the people in my showroom floor. I will be willing to bet anyone here that if I gave you the option of, you tell me a close rate of a third-party provider or somebody that you use, and I could say I would give you X number of leads, or if I say I'm going to give you 1,000 people on your showroom, your managers and your salespeople can do their jobs if they've been effectively trained. Your job is to put the people in the showroom. You've got to get the opportunities, and you have to have they have to have the number of at-bats. That's all it comes down to. Now, you would shook your head. Now, how do you measure effectiveness on lead providers?
I use about 4 different matrices that I use. I look at how many leads I got in.
So let's start with each one. That's common. So how many leads did we get?
Right.
Easy one.
I look at, and some of them may be duplicate leads.
That's okay. We have that. Duplicates or undeliverables.
You wash those out.
Yep.
I also look, and this is just for my department, I look at, when I look at my leads, what source do they come through? Do they come through Google? Do they come through, were they referrals? Were they bankruptcy customers? Where did they come from? Then we narrow it down. Then I look at back to me. Those that didn't respond back to me, I wash those out.
So response back means the lead has come in, you've done something, they responded. That's the engaged leads for us. We count that or the volley, the two-way communication, not the one-way, and not our answer back. So our autoresponder or our answer, the 3 high, low, medium prices, it doesn't count. We got to get them to talk back. But go ahead.
And an actual, whether it's through
Yep.
emails, texts, or just a regular
Yep,
conversation
that's fine.
over the telephone. Then I go set the appointment. Then when they come in, that's when I measure closing.
Okay.
After that customer's come in. So there's a lot of washing. I mean, there's probably 4, 5, 6 tiers that you go through to wash it all out to get a real closing ratio to get it engaged.
I would only argue, respectfully argue, that in the end the close rate was almost irrelevant. What you're really tracking is one thing: give me bodies to the showroom, get my team opportunities, and we'll talk about how valuable each one is in a second. But if I was an internet manager, the way I look at my job is to figure out how to get the most engaged leads to my people. Because engaged leads let me make appointments, which leads to showroom traffic, which leads me to ultimately get the chance to sell a car. It doesn't get any easier than that because, and I'll just say this, that what we see in close ratios, when we're able to look, there are 2 stores that are located with about 20 miles of here, down here in Florida, kind of out in the middle of, they're not really close to anyone. And they sit directly across the street in a town that's got really, it's a small town. And both stores are actually kind of new because both were actually hurt in a tornado about 7 years ago. So they were rebuilt. So you have 2 different franchises directly across the street. And we just happened to look at it just a couple days ago. So when we looked at the data, they used the same lead providers. And we know what the close rate, we see what they're talking about in their DMS and CRMs. But so they do wildly different with the same lead providers in close rates. The way they run their business is so different. So when we go in to talk to them, they happen to use our service, but regardless, it doesn't just allow me to figure out what the metrics are. The way they run their business is so different, the way they think about their business. One of them is constantly looking at which lead providers give us the highest engaged leads. And so they're always, the low lead engagers, they're taking those people and saying, you don't do me any good. If you only give me a 20% engagement, I need people that give me 60%, 70% engagement, because ultimately my job as an internet director or as an owner is to give my team opportunity. If I don't get enough engaged leads, you're worthless to me. Doesn't matter how, I don't care that I sold 6 cars on you, because what I'm doing is I'm spinning my wheels. Let me give you an example. Let's say I get 100 leads. Only 30%, 30 engaged, 70 do not. Well, in some cases, somebody would say, well, if we sold 5 out of 30, well, that's a pretty good number. Or 6 out of 30, that's 20%, or maybe 7 out of 30. I would say it the other way around. If you get 100, only 30 engaged, your team has chased 70 leads. There is a lot of time and effort chasing 70 leads that don't respond. How many emails and phone calls, how much time is your team chasing leads that are not responsive? And so engagement is important to a dealership, because the higher the engagement, the less wasted time your team is chasing the wrong leads. You want to get that number as high as you can. We have dealerships across the country that get in the high 60s and 70% engagement, but it comes to a lot of work. They're shifting out a lot of third-party providers. They're holding third-party providers' feet to the fire, saying, we only care about engagement. It doesn't matter how many leads we get or how many sales I get. That's yesterday's news. You give me enough engaged leads, my team will sell the cars, but I need the engagement. I want them talking to me. Does that make sense? That's really the new way we need to think about the business. And if we want to go forward, that's really what we're looking for.
If 70 is the high, where's the average?
51%. So the national average, out of looking at 8.5 million leads last year, 51% engaged. So 49%. So what does that really say? That half the leads come in aren't going to engage with you, and half do. And I have some dealers that are 35 or 40% engagement. So they're looking at 60% of the time, they're chasing leads that aren't responsive. Their teams are ineffective because they're working the wrong leads, or they're working the wrong lead sources. And every lead source that's here, that's downstairs right now, has value. The question is, what is the value to you? Where you are, Not across the country, not across the street in some cases. It really comes down to, what is it good for you right now at your store? I can't tell you how many times I work with dealer groups, and I'll go in and I'll go, why do you use this lead provider? It's a low engagement. Well, we've always used them. Well, we sold so many cars last month. Everybody in town uses them. What difference does that make? Listen, if somebody gives me a referral to a restaurant and it has bad food just because everybody eats there, I'm not going there again. I'm only going to eat there one time. I don't need to go down that path 2 or 3 times. We need to look at who we're spending our money with and figuring out why we're spending our money. And the other thing, go ahead. Well, you got to. 6 months. Well, here's the deal. So now, just even having that conversation, just thinking that way, changes the whole relationship with third-party providers. If you ask that question, you've already almost solved your own issue, because now you're doing it right. You're saying, okay, you're coming in. Your effectiveness to me is how many engaged leads you give me. I'm going to measure that. So I need to look at, now, 30 days, I don't think that's right, but I think by 90 days, in 90 days, what your true cost is to work with that lead provider. So let me show you how to figure true cost. It's really kind of an easy number. So these 2 numbers right here. Here's a little math quiz. If you need to pull out your iPhone, you can to do this math. If I'm paying $20 for a lead provider, $20 for a lead, with a 50% engagement, how much am I really paying per lead? $40. That's effective lead cost. If I pay $2,000 a month for a lead provider that gives me a 33% engagement, what am I really spending for my leads? $6,000. We don't look at it that way because we're always thinking about close rates. We need to think about where, if we have certain dollars in marketing, how are we effectively using that money to get the most opportunities in our store? And it's the effective lead cost which will help you get there. So you make a good point, because the first thing you said is how much time. It's how much time, and then what is my true cost to do business with you? You got X number of dollars to spend. Your job as an internet director is get the most opportunity for your store for the dollars that you spend in marketing. It's not difficult. The more opportunities I get, if my salespeople and my managers are trained, we're going to sell the cars. Closing ratio will be there. Give your team the opportunity. Give them a time and measure what your true cost of leads are. Does that make sense? So the question is, just that, so if I ask it that way, how many of us calculate lead cost looking at it like that? Or have thought about our true lead cost when we look at our bills from our lead providers? Are we looking at what we're really paying for it? Or do we measure it against how many cars we sell and go, well, we sold 10 cars, and so that we made X number of dollars against what? It's the wrong thought. It's the wrong measurement. It's the misdirection, because that's the easy way to look at it, but it's not the true cost of what the cost is of doing business. So we've spent 30 years with it. Who here has been pitched with, well, if you just sell 2 more cars, you can afford my services? Let's do it the other way around. Who hasn't been pitched? There'd be a lot less arms in the air. So we've spent 30 years doing it that way. It's the way that we've been brought up. We've been brought up to think of sales equates to, does this have value? Completely wrong thought. What we're trying to really ask you to do as internet directors, stewards of the marketing dollars of your dealership, is look at it different. Is look at opportunity. Engaged leads is the true opportunity where you can grow your business. It's not around close rates. So lesson 2. Well, if you were thinking about close rates, if I increase my close rate, can you grow your business? Not likely. Not likely, because the car business has been around. I used to have a customer, Manly Motors, out in Belvedere, Illinois, which is outside of Chicago, about 100 miles. It's the second oldest Ford dealership in the United States. It was a feed and grain store in the 1800s. And there are pictures of the dealership from inside the store looking out on a street that's not paved. And you have 2 salesmen leaning on the front door, looking out. And these are people who are taking a real person on a horse and trying to sell them a car. So, dehorsing was real back then. I mean, you actually had to get somebody off a horse and try to sell them a car. But after 100 years, that's like 1915. They're still standing on the door. So the reality is you're not going to double your closing ratio. Your closing ratio in this room, 20, 23, 25. I managed dealerships for 17 years. I could back in any kind of closing ratio you want. It was kind of irrelevant. So that's not going to do it. Well, then how do I grow my business? What makes a dealership sell 500 cars and somebody sell 200 cars? It's not about closing rate. It's really, when you look at it's the chicken or egg. It's the opportunity or the sale is essentially what you're looking for. So this question, the myths going forward is closing rate's important. The facts are it's irrelevant. What's really important is the number of opportunities, or as we call it, engaged leads. That is the true fact of how to grow a business. The more engaged leads you guys get, the more you challenge your third-party providers to give you, the more successful you will ultimately be. Does a big dealership get more opportunities because it's big? Or is it big because it gets more opportunity? I was at a Toyota dealership up in the Boston area in November. They sold 900 new. Now, they didn't sell 900 new because they got 500 leads. They sold 900 new because they got 4,000 leads. Not counting what they did for business, they have a 48-person internet department. And they're working 4,000 leads. They're big because they hold the feet to the fire of every third-party provider. They get more opportunity than anybody else in town. That's why they're big. Not that their closing ratio is any better than anybody else's, but they get it. The more people I can put through the showroom floor, the more opportunity my team gets, the bigger we get. This is kind of an easy business if we measure it the correct way. Yes?
When you say they hold their feet to the fire,
Yeah.
what are some of the things they would say?
Well, up till, let's say, 6 months ago, they pretty much did what everybody else here. They've used everybody. I mean, when you need 4,000 leads, and it's a metro area, I mean, so it's a big area, you've got to use everybody. And they did what everybody else did. They never looked at engagement rates. But one of the things that will happen when you go back and you look at it and you go, okay, let's track volley. Lead comes in, I ask a question, they answer. You'll be surprised actually what those numbers might be. The lead providers that you go, they're good, all of a sudden may be your best. So when I say they held their feet to the fire, it was all of a sudden we need to find out what your base is. What's the medium? I told you the national average is 51%. So 51% is the complete average. Where do I fall with my lead providers? Figure what that number is first. Then you got to look at anybody who does not give you 51%, if that's your medium, and say, I need two things. You know, your value is not as good. Then you need to start rotating your bottom people, bottom lead providers. If you've got a lead provider that's giving you 20% engagement, you need to think about replacing that one with somebody else. And just what he said, you got 90 days. What you bring to me is, you're a great guy. Everybody in town uses you. I hear about your name. You've got a great marketing department, advertising. It doesn't make any difference to me. If you don't give me enough engaged leads, you're worthless to me. You have to constantly, as internet directors, be thinking of how do I get to 65, 70, 80%, 80%, I've never seen, 79, I've seen 75% engagement rates. Big lead providers. How do you get there? How do you keep moving that direction? But holding their feet to the fire was just really saying, okay, I've got to replace you with someone else. Or you got to figure out how to get me better leads. And being able to have that conversation as opposed to this conversation. Oh, they bring good value because I sold 8 cars last month on them. You know what? Give me more engagement. We'll sell 15 cars. Yes?
So take it into its logical next step for me is engagement is one thing, but I want to look at the subset of positive engagement versus negative engagement. Because I bought enough, too many bad leads to admit. A third-party core from Nissan or 2 weeks old stale leads, I may talk to them, but they're going to say, go ahead.
That's okay.
Right?
You actually, so had I planted him here, and the golf club is yours. So that's the exact question I needed to have somebody ask right now. So if you did this, I mean, if this was the reality, you ask the next question. Or if that's true, if we're saying that, forget about close ratio, it's all about engaged leads. Are all engaged leads equal? They're not. But they want to be. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about it, because this is the last part of this. We're going to explain this. Go ahead.
Costs for the engaged lead too. I mean, if you got one company giving you a lead at $10 and they only got 40%, the other company starts.
You have to look at effective.
And it's 50%. You may be getting more value out of the lower cost.
You need to that's one. But that is one of the things that you need to start measuring as internet directors, is what your effective cost of lead is. And we've done a poor job of that in the past. So you need to look at two things. You need to look at, okay, how many am I getting? What is my true cost? And my marketing dollars, what am I really paying for that provider? Because then all of a sudden, between that and the opportunity engagement rates, you start to figure out where's the real value. Where can I put more dollars to get more opportunity for my team? Then we have to answer his question, which is, well, they're not all the same. When we looked at this data, by the way, this is a group of stores that we do business with, that we were able to get metrics out of. That's all it was, just I could do the metrics. When we took all of their leads that they've got, and since we know their close ratio, we went, okay, we'll put close ratio aside. What we did was we effectively redid all of the leads in this dealer group and refocused it. We took what their medium score was. We did this. We didn't do this for real. We did this as a test. We got rid of all of the lower lead providers, bought more from the higher lead providers, and then recalculated with and in some cases, the closing ratio was lower because that lead provider, even though the engagement was higher, had a lower closing ratio. In the end, this dealer group saw 9% increase in sales just by doing that, even though some of them were not as good. The question is, how did they figure that out, and how do you work on that? There is a way to do that, but it proved to us that we were measuring the wrong thing. What we need to do is start to go back home, get a clean sheet, and go, okay, we got to do this different. What's my effective cost per lead? 1. 2, how many engagements am I getting? And then start to figure out how to raise it with the same dollars, spending the right dollars wisely, but getting the right lead providers. So I want to get through this because this next piece is important. All right. So when we looked at this, dealers across the country had wildly different close rates from the same third-party providers. Why? It was simple. They had inherent bias. So we started to ask questions. How is it possible? How could you use lead provider A right around the corner? Lead provider A, completely different close rates, and talk to the managers and they go, absolutely love them. How about you? Absolutely hate them. It wasn't even possible. It didn't even make any sense. It was the inherent bias on the information. You guys may recognize this. There may be an inherent bias with these two. May. And it doesn't really matter if I told everybody to stand up and then move on which side of the room you are. There's an inherent bias built into all this. What I would tell you to do is figure out the bias and look at what the true numbers are. Start to actually put a pencil to this. It's not difficult. I mean, the iPhone's got a calculator on it. We can actually come up with the right dollars, start to effectively put this together. So now I'm going to answer your question. Then in all engaged leads, are they the same? No, but they all mean well. And leads all mean well. The question is, what do they really mean? So let's talk about it. So all leads have intent. The word intent is because they are a lead. We don't get a lead for someone on a car because they're trying to get a dentist appointment. They actually are thinking. Their intent, their purpose is to do something about a car. That's what they're thinking. Question is, where does the lead come from? You brought up a very good one. So according to new research in the Journal of Consumer Research, stating an intention leads to consumer action. Just by performing the process of submitting a lead shows they have intent to move forward. Now, just because of that doesn't mean that all leads are the same. So we're going to break them down for you. This is what you get to get when you see 9 million leads or 8.5 million leads. You get to actually break it down into a couple of different groups. So the first one is what we're used to. Everybody in this room knows the action taker lead. Who is the action taker? 56% engaged in the first 2 weeks. 9% of those leads would not talk to you for 3 weeks. So this will be a question, as internet directors, this is how you're going to have to go home and figure out how your CRM is set up. Because the CRMs in almost every dealership are only set up to take care of this guy. And I'm going to show you 2 more that are not part of them, we're not set up for, and this is where the big miss is. Most likely go to a dealer's website or your chat, take 7 engagements to get an appointment. Only 18% of the total leads you get as internet directors are what we call action takers. Yet all CRMs are set up, 100% are set up to take care of action takers. Because we didn't know that there was 2 more different groups out there. Our thought was kind of everybody's an action taker. They want to do something. They want to buy something. Now remember this, one of the things, again, that we learned is that leads follow into this funnel. And the funnel looks like this. The higher the funnel is where your manufacturer third-party leads are. Hand raiser leads are at the very tippy top of that large funnel. Those, they give you a lead for an iTunes card. Way up at the top of that funnel. Down at the bottom is where your dealership is. The closer they are to you, the closer they are to being an action taker. Action takers typically will come from your website, your chat, your credit app. The closer they are to actually touching your dealership, the closer they are to being an action taker. So that's the first, but that represents only 18% of the leads you're going to talk to. That's what we're kind of used to. So remember, not every lead is that. Doesn't matter. Give you the most chances. Thinkers. This is the second group. 59%. Most of your leads are this. Not the first one. What's a thinker? Thinkers, 47% engaged in the first 2 weeks. Now, 17% of these won't talk to you for 3 weeks. Don't even respond for 3 weeks. So first off, are we even set up to even go out after 3 weeks? You may have some autoresponders going out there sending some stuff, but essentially these people are out there a little bit further. They're most likely to go to research sites. They're coming out of here. By the way, take a look at that. It takes 13 engagements, 13 different touches to get that person to respond on average. So over the period of time. And this is the largest group right here. This is where dealers start to fail. Right here. They're used to action takers. Thinkers are already a couple of weeks further out in the process. As internet managers, if you're controlling your CRM, you need to think about what's going on right here for these people, because more of them are out another couple of weeks, and we're thinking about how we sell a car tonight. It's not the way people work. It's not the way their functions. The last piece is what you brought up, is the one that we've missed the most. Big data showed us this piece here. This is one thing that you can change to your CRMs and the way you do business, that every store in here can immediately sell more cars. And these are the people who are the researchers. So what big data told us is that a majority of leads made decisions in the first 2 weeks, and some didn't make a decision or even start to reach out until week 4 and 5. There's a second bump no one knew about. I've had an opportunity to spend some time with some of the manufacturers, and we've given them some of this data. And of course, they're like, they were shocked at some of the data. Now, this is not, 30 leads here. We're looking at a couple of million leads to be able to say, there's a whole buying cycle we completely drop over top of in the car business. So what researchers are, only 42%, so less than half even talk to you in the first 2 weeks. But 28% responded after 8 weeks. So when you take all 3 groups, you get about 35 to 40% are not going to talk to you for 3 weeks. And quite frankly, this group, 28%, are really in week 4 and 5. What you'll find typically in a typical CRM is a very fast start, a couple of days, a couple of emails, autoresponders, emails, phone calls that are attacking the customer, because we're thinking they're all action takers. Over a period of 3 or 4 days, end of a week, there's an email that goes out. 2 weeks, it starts to slow down. We've already moved on to new leads. Then we go out there a couple of weeks. Then what happens is we get a 30-day, or there's some out there, we wait 30 days and send them an email. We jump right over top of where the customer is. There's a bump in there at week right in the week 4 and 5, where we should take any lead who has not responded and treat them like they're brand new. Instead of jumping over the top of them, it is that section of these people who are researchers, they're coming from the manufacturer site. So when you brought up that, oh, they come in from Nissan, they're not a good lead, it's only because where they came from showed who they were. They weren't at your dealership level. They had not gone all the way into where your site is. They hadn't picked your store. They're researching. They're a little bit further out. We look at them as not great leads. They're telling you, I have intent. It's not on your time frame. So there's their time frame. So when you go back, look at how your CRM is set up and see if you're jumping completely over the top of the second biggest bump of sales that you can have in your dealership. Has anybody on an anecdotal thought ever seen any of that and went, wow, we did see people come in that 4 or 5 week, all of a sudden they just started jumping up. It's one of those things that we saw and we never had the data to back it up. Well, we saw the data and we went, there it was. There's the actual part that actually proved that point to us. So it's not that all leads aren't created equal. They're not created equal in the same amount of time. It's the way we have to work the leads. These people want to do business. Remember, it's their dime, so it's their time. So the sweet spot, just to show you, that action taker, 1 to 14 days. I don't need to show you that. We live that every day. Gets a little more difficult with the thinkers. They're out there in that 1 week to 2 or 3 weeks. But it's that researcher. That's what I would ask you all to look at your CRM tools and determine whether or not you're set up to do business with a researcher. If you're going to do this, if you're going to buy into our theory, not just my theory, but our theory that closing ratios, that's yesterday's news. My job, Internet Director, is give my team opportunities. The only way to give them opportunities is I need to get engaged leads. If I get engaged leads, I need to figure out how those engaged leads want to talk to me. And I need to do it on their terms. So now that we know what the terms are, and now that we know what we're looking for, I would send you guys back out to your dealerships and look at my effective cost, look at who my low-performing engaged lead providers are, figure out how to raise one, look at my CRM tool and figure, am I set up to do business the way that people want to do business, to attack and get those leads when they're ready to do business? Now, are you all writing that down? Because I'm going to call each one of you in 90 days to see if you did this. All right, just checking.
John, are you saying even if you ignored everything else except the thinker, you'd probably increase your engaged leads?
Yeah, that's funny. The researcher. So the researcher is the one that's been out there. It's just out there for weeks, and it turned out
The thinker is 55%.
the thinker, exactly right. That's a big one. Again, that's that. We are used to the action takers. We think in the business. I grew up where I was told, and I forget who told me. He's passed away more than probably 30 years ago. Something that, we have 72 hours. I forget. How's it go? With the 72% buy-in, 72. Do we still say that?
Old MADA.
Yeah, well, it was that, and everybody wanted a nice used car for around $5,000. So I don't know that that's changed. So those two things, may have changed over the years. But 72% bought in 72 hours. I used to hear the numbers didn't make any sense. They're not relevant anymore. What you really have is you need to be thinking about how the customer, what their cycle is. And you can tell, I can tell you this, look at where the leads are coming from. They tell you in the same process, wherever the lead originates from, it's going to tell you who they are. If they're coming through your site, that's an action taker. If they're coming as a third-party provider, you better think about a long-term process for that lead. And if you can set up individual lead providers on a different CRM schedule, you should be doing that. You should take advantage of researchers who are coming through the manufacturer site as understanding. They're not action. They could be, but you may be in for a little bit of a long haul. Your job is to get that opportunity in the way the customer wants to present it to itself. So there's your sweet spot, but very many dealers miss that whole end spot. And just to give you this, as we wrap this up, here's the 379,000 leads. This is just a little bit of data that we pulled. In that, we sent out 2 million messages to these leads. And we broke it down by how many messages we had to send to get a response, messages to appointment. Here's the dealer's website, only 7 on average. But I want you to look up here. Manufacturer third party, these are the ones that you're talking about. it took 25, but they responded. But look, we're set up to think this, but that's what it took to get those leads to respond. Remember, the customer still had intent. They just didn't have it on our time frame. We need to rethink the way that we look at leads and how we're going to market to them the correct way. So what did we learn? So engagement, I love this slide, trumps close rate. Any questions? Oh, come on, you guys got to have a question. Somebody's got to go, oh my gosh, if we got to go back and do all this work, yes?
So, return on investment with your leads, not important, is what you're trying to say.
I'm sorry, return on investment with what?
Your leads and what you're spending, and then what you're actually like back on the returns. Are you then saying that it's not?
I think you were looking at it the wrong way. When you think of return on investment for a lead provider, in most cases we do this. We go, I paid $2,000 for that, $1,500 for that lead provider, and I sold 10 cars, and I made $25,000 against the $1,500 we spent. I will tell you that is an antiquated way to look at the business model that we have today. What you should be thinking is, for that $1,500, how much engaged leads, how many opportunities does my team get? Is the $1,500 a real $1,500? First off, what's my engagement rate? What's my effective lead cost? And then figure out whether or not, if I spent that money elsewhere, would I give my team more opportunities? You have to have faith in your dealerships and your management staff that if I can put souls in the showroom, they're going to find a way to make a deal under those 8 different things they have to figure out every single time they make a sale. My job is to give them the opportunity. Now, you still have to look at that. I'm just giving you a different way to think about that and go, well, I've always measured it this way. If I measured it that way, what does it really mean? And I'm not talking about go home and fire everybody that you have, but certainly look at a lead provider when you get home and go, are they really effective? And should I look at someone else and bring them in to see if they can bring me more value? Yes.
Do you believe, and I hear this all the time too, when we kind of threaten some of the big guys to leave because we're not seeing the return on investment of the footprint, the idea of footprint. You have to leave they'll come across you need that footprint there in terms of like the admins and the cars.com, right?
I'm not buying any of that.
Okay.
I used to buy that. The data does not support that. The data supports give you opportunities. That's where the value is. Yes.
You mentioned researchers, for example, have 18 engagements, 18 plus engagements.
Yep.
What are some of the best practices for those engagements? Is it an auto? Is it a phone call?
It's you know what? We could do another whole class on that. But so that engagement means however you got to get the person to respond. You're looking for them to get that. I need them to respond back to make the appointment. Right. But so I think every store will have to figure that out themselves. But we count it one way. But it doesn't matter if you can figure out whether it's a phone call, text, email. Get them to respond. Count them as an engagement. And then for us, that qualifies as something that you can hold that's good for your store. Higher engagement equates to more opportunity. That's what the data supports. Thank you guys very much for coming in.